Hi, this is Stephanie Miller from The Stephanie Miller Show. Please enjoy this exclusive clip from my show on Political Voices Network. And we were saying on cue, here's all the same characters from 2016. Jill Stein, Susan Sarandon, like all of the chaos agents, right?
Yeah, plenty of them. Plenty of them to go around out there. And it looked like they're gaining traction. Who's this new guy? Dean, whatever his name is,
that
right?
guy. Yeah.
Don't
I
even.
mean, this guy actually came and essentially said that Kamala Harris was stupid. I mean, what is going on within the party?
Yeah.
Fractional groups here have decided again, like Joe Manchin, they would rather live under a dictatorship. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not talking about the Handmaid's Tale. We're talking about the Handmaid's Tale plus the political body that ran the Handmaidens.
Yeah.
Do you want this? You want the end of American democracy as it's been practiced for 248 years? Stop being ignorant. Stop working for Trump.
Yeah.
So thankful for you, Malcolm Nance. We have Tony coming in to check audio levels, but they're fine now that he shouted. I think everything's good now.
All the kinks worked out.
Yeah, everything's worked out for you because, you're someone that, like, with Dr. Redlener, you went over there. You've given your own, blood, sweat, and tears over there. And what do you think is going to happen? I mean, Chris Coons went on to talk about like what this means strategically to give up on Ukraine. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, listen. Let me explain a couple of things. Wow, you have gnomes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Go ahead.
Let me explain a couple of things. First off, I want to make this eminently clear to everybody listening. No matter what happens with U.S. funding, Ukraine is not going to lose this war because it's not about ammunition. It's about heart and guts. And President Zelensky said this just 2 days ago. He will go to other sources. He will get ammunition and equipment from Europe. But the United States is already, the Republican Congress and Donald Trump have already done their damage.
Yeah.
They got funding stopped at a critical time in the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Now we're going into winter. They have achieved Putin's personal goals of hurting Ukraine and getting the American public to think that it's a lost cause. And that's what Republicans do because they work for Putin.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's one more get your reaction to Senator Coons on this.
I think that some of us who are out here as co-chairs of the campaign, as leaders in the Democratic Party, can and should go more directly at former President Trump's dangerous rhetoric and highlight the fact that a dozen of his closest, most senior aides, former members of his cabinet, have publicly said he is not fit to serve. President Biden, frankly, is doing what he should do, focusing on leading and on governing, putting us in a stronger place on the world stage, deterring Iran, deterring Putin, standing by our close allies.
When the president obviously wrote a op-ed the other day, I don't know if you saw it, but just about standing up for democracy, whether it's with Israel or with Ukraine. And I got to get your take on this latest deal. Obviously, Israeli cabinet members approved a deal brokered by the U.S. and Qatar to free at least 50 hostages seized from southern Israel. It would be over the next few days, starting on November 23rd, in return for a 4 to 5 day pause in fighting. As well as the release of some Palestinian prisoners in Israel. What is your initial take on that, Malcolm?
Well, I think that any deal that gets the hostages out is a good deal.
Yeah.
I knew very, very early on. You might recall, I think it was 2 days after the attack, I flew to Doha.
Yeah.
And I knew immediately, as soon as I landed on my Qatar Airways flight, and in front of me was the Secretary of State's aircraft and the Secretary of Defense's National Airborne Command Post had also just landed at Doha. And I realized, hey, there's going to be some very, very high-level meetings because Qatar is the intermediary for Hamas. The same way they were the intermediary for the Taliban. These are people who have the Arab credentials that they can talk to them. Hamas has their headquarters in Doha. So it's very clear the Qataris were going to play a big role. The Qataris want to play a big role because they want to punch well above their weight on the diplomatic arena, whereas they sort of embarrassed Saudi Arabia, definitely embarrassed Egypt. who themselves don't want any of the Palestinians ever coming into Egypt, and the Jordanians as well. So they made this deal. If it's good, if the Israelis accept it, fine. Hamas thinks that they're going to get away. They're going to be able to move ammunition, stockpile things, weapons and equipment while getting the hostages moved around. They also wanted the Israelis to have no surveillance flights. Okay, no surveillance flights. The United States can have surveillance flights, right?
Yeah.
And satellites. So it's not like they're going to get away with anything.
Let's talk about what's next. Here, your reaction to David Ignatius talking about
I think
Netanyahu.
when the war ends, Bibi's gone. In a week in Israel, I couldn't find people on the right, on the left, who were willing to speak up for him. There's a sense that his polarizing politics in the year before this war broke out, trying to keep his unwieldy coalition together by making demands on behalf of his right-wing supporters, weakened the nation.
Yeah, one last one. And
one former Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, not speaking about Bibi by name, but generally said, Bibi's tactics left Israel so weak that its enemies finally saw that it was vulnerable, and then they attacked. I think that feeling is widespread in Israel. I think there's a desire for new leadership. There's talk about who else. The polls are very clear that Bibi lags far behind Benny Gantz, his coalition partner. So I do think a change is coming. And I think a lot of Israelis do hold him responsible for the country coming into war so unprepared.
So, Malcolm, your reaction to that, and is there a chance for real peace and a two-state solution if you're post-Hamas and post-Netanyahu?
Well, we're already in a shadow post-Netanyahu world. If any of you guys have been following me on Twitter or my Substacks, you will know that I have been screaming this loud and clear. Netanyahu has to go. He was responsible for the lack of defense on the border because he removed 3 brigades, which is, I think it was over 10,000 soldiers that were manning those checkpoints who would have had a massive response. They would have held Hamas at the fence. He removed them, sent them to the West Bank in order to quell the Palestinians there so that he could move more right-wing settlers into the West Bank. Let's face it, the West Bank is going to have to be at some point given back to the Palestinians as part of a two-state solution, which means they're going to have to move out 500,000 of these armed settlers, right-wing extremists in many circumstances, who are there because Netanyahu wanted them there, who has fostered this belief that the West Bank, that, this Israeli version of from the river to the sea, that's an extremist point of view, and that was never part of the deal.
Yeah.
But Netanyahu is now responsible personally for the largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust.
Yeah. And what do you make, Malcolm, when you hear, the Americans, the polling isn't good for Biden on his handling of this? I think he's handled it about as well as you can handle this unbelievably difficult a situation. He spoke out against what you just talked about, sanctioning the Israeli settlers. I mean, I think he has tried to be as balanced as he possibly can in this situation. I mean, should we be concerned about that? Because now I'm going, it seems like he certainly was involved in getting this hostage deal done. Is he going to get any credit?
Look, I can't understand the Democrats who have been keeping Biden in the high 30s in public approval. That's not Republicans. We know how much they have, 45%. It's this 8, 9, 10% of Democrats who have decided Joe Biden is bad for America. There was a funny tweet yesterday a guy was mocking the New York Times pitch bot, and it said, Biden gets hostages away from Hamas, gets a ceasefire, brings peace to the Middle East. How this dooms him for 2024.
That's not a joke. That's what the story will be.
That's exactly what they're saying, that he's doomed.
Yeah.
Now, look, I already posted out there my exit strategy for President Biden if he just decides that this is not enough. At Christmas, he could always make a presidential Christmas announcement and say, as your Christmas present in America, I am going to retire, and I would like to introduce you to the 47th President of the United States, Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
And give her a year. But right
Well,
now,
I was Team Kamala first in the
Harris.
primary, so I'm
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
But
I know.
and I was
Hey.
saying we just talked about Senator John Kennedy. Just said the other day, and when her IQ hits 45, she should sell. I mean, they're already preemptively, with these racist,
Kamala Harris-
misogynistic attacks.
Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of California.
Yeah.
Okay? And if you think that they are having a problem with the Attorney General of New York State, who is a black woman,
Yeah.
or, the district attorney in Georgia, who's a black woman, they're terrified
Yeah.
of Kamala Harris. My problem is all the namby-pamby liberals who are supposedly our allies, who are supposedly helped elect Kamala Harris, saying, she doesn't excite me. She doesn't do enough for me. She doesn't do enough things. If
Yeah.
you wanted Dick Cheney as a vice president, they would have asked for Liz Cheney. She is
Yeah.
doing the job of the vice president. But you know what? Her job is to be prepared to step in if the president of the United States resigns or retires or is incapacitated, and that's her job. And
Yeah.
she will. But no, I am all about the idea of ruining all of those Trump 47 hats, right?
Yeah.
Oh, if Joe Biden were to retire a year in advance, she would be 47, and they'd have to buy all new Chinese hats.
Malcolm, real quick before you go, because time for you to get a little shouty about fascism and religious, theocracy, which you know a little something about. You've written about Islamic extremism forever. You quoted Ronald Brownstein from the LA Times, as I did earlier today. He says where the religious right is inevitably heading post-Dobbs, in addition to suggesting he hopes the Supreme Court will reverse decision allowing same-sex marriage, he also wrote in support of Texas's anti-sodomy laws, which said gay men caught having sex should be fined. I mean, these are our choices: fascism, religious theocracy, or democracy. That's the choice in 2024, right?
Absolutely. But here's where I'm going to talk to the youngins. All right. Apparently, you obviously haven't seen my first TikTok video that I put up, where I'm exceptional. I'm so shouty. I'm shouting louder than the Canadian wind that I'm in. No. Look, America is not a black and white nation. It is not something you can vote for one thing or the other. When they say in Texas, they will arrest you for using Texas's highways to go to an airport or go out of the state to get an abortion, they're not joking.
Yeah.
When they say that they will come and take, now that they've taken away your right to choose what happens to a woman's body, that they will remove all rights for gays, they're not joking.
Yeah.
When Donald Trump says that he's willing to arrest, deport all pro-Palestinian protesters who are not American citizens, he is not joking.
Thank you.
You cannot come up and say, I'm for the Palestinian children, but I'll destroy democracy.
Yep.
This is stupid.
Real
the
quick,
way that some are viewing the election.
Misinformation. Disinformation is the thing you always warned us about even before 2016. And you retweeted Adam Schiff, who said Elon Musk has been amplifying anti-Semitic content, profiting from misinformation, and allowing pro-Hamas propaganda to spread on X. This needs to stop. I've joined Dan Goldman and Representative Raskin in demanding accountability from X. I mean, we are just going to have to fight